Well, it's been a year, hasn't it? 2022. What a year it has been, a year full of video games. Welcome, everybody, to my 2022 Arbitrary Video Game Awards. 2022 has been a busy year for me personally, for the channel, and for my hobby time, where I've diversified in a way that I haven't really done since I was a teenager. Painted a lot of little miniatures this year. In terms of this YouTube channel, one of the big things that I wanted to do was in 2022 to put more time into creating better videos. This wasn't a New Year's resolution or anything, and I think that's probably a good job because in terms of video editing and stuff, I don't think I'm actually any better this December than I was last December. Really, bit of a failure there. Nor have I really diversified the games I played for the channel this year. On the screen, you can see a list of pretty much everything that I've played this year. Things that I've put more than a handful of minutes in just to try it or refund it. As you can see, there's a lot of games. Let's split them up into some categories, shall we? I played a lot of Soulslikes. I played Demajen, Still Rising. I played The Surge 2 on the PlayStation 5, The Tarnishing of Yesteryear. I played a little bit of Remnant from the Ashes again after the announcement of Remnant 2. I played 30 plus hours of Grime when the Colours of Rot DLC came out. I spent an awful lot of time playing Yesteryear Curse of the Stars and then stopped because I was getting annoyed with it. I played, I'm not even entirely sure how many hours of Soldiers. And I played 165 hours of Elden Ring, both on the PC and on the PlayStation 5, where I got all the trophies. I've also played a number of relatively long or open world games. I played a chunk of, but not all of, Horizon Forbidden West. I got the Platinum Trophy for God of War Ragnarok, and as I said, I've played a lot of Elden Ring. On the subject of RPGs, I played quite a lot of isometric action RPGs. I played, or tried to play at least, Diablo 2 Resurrected, and I keep on going back to it, and I keep on trying to get into it, but it's just so slow and so boring. I've played, as I always do, an awful lot of Diablo 3. I've got over 2,000, well over 2,000 hours now in that game. If I put a note on screen, I'll have been and actually counted up how many I've played since I last counted. I played quite a lot of Diablo Immortal, actually. Diablo Immortal is a fun game. It's shittily monetized. It's horrendous in terms of everything around the actual gameplay, but the gameplay is pretty decent. I've played some, but not a lot of, Lost Ark. I've been looking forward to Lost Ark for a long time. It just didn't quite grab me the way I hoped it would. Gender locking characters often does that for you. And I've played an awful number of hours of the game that I'm not allowed to talk about, but is related to other games on this little list. A game that I've got a couple of videos that I've got planned to talk about, things that aren't related to an NDA, quite soon in the new year. A game that is very high on my list of games that I'm really looking forward to playing next year, based on quite a number, we're into triple digits of hours played under NDA. As well as these modern games, I've actually played some games that are from yesteryear. I played Castlevania Order of Ecclesia and Castlevania Portrait of Ruin, both of which won the Nintendo DS, and really enjoyed playing those. I played I don't even know how to pronounce it, Lunar Nights, just because somebody asked me to make a map for it. I played a bit of Tales of Iron, which I really enjoyed, and I've played a chunk of, as I say, Remnant from the Ashes. All games that are a little bit older that have been out for a while now. I played a few Quirky games as well. I played Metal Hellsinger for the channel. I played, well, one mission of Metal Hellsinger for the channel. Really enjoyed that game. Really good fun. I mean, I do like a good metal soundtrack, so naturally I was going to enjoy it for that. But considering I'm not exactly Mr. Aimbot, it was a good game for me to play. I played the entirety of Cult of the Lamb. I've actually got a playlist of Cult of the Lamb. I've got an entire series of videos ready. I keep forgetting to release it, and considering how little time I've had to put videos together in December, I really should have just put those out. They're there, they're done, they're edited, they're uploaded, they're ready to go. Haven't done it yet. I played some of, but didn't finish, Stray. It's a cute cat game. I liked the cute cat game. It was cute, and it had cats and weird headcrab things. But yeah, Stray was cool. I also played Evil West, which is very, very interesting and very, very silly, and looks and feels in some ways like a throwback to the PlayStation 3 era, and I am absolutely here for it, frankly. Evil West is actually a really good time that I super enjoyed. I also played a lot of Dark Tide, Warhammer 40k Dark Tide, which I guess comes under this category as well. And surprise, 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 I've also played a buttload of Metroidvania games. I played Islets, I've played those 2 Castlevania games that I've spoken about. I played the Colours of Rot DLC for Grime, Haiku the Robot, Hack, its final release. I haven't played it in early access for God knows how many months at this point. The long-awaited Ghost Song, Moon Scars, Two Lunar Nights, Tales of Iron, as I've already mentioned, Zappling Bygone, a solo dev effort, Eterna Noctis, which I played right towards the start of the year, which I'm going to talk about a bit later in one of the following categories, Soldiers, Hunter X, and The Night Witch. And of course I've played a lot of Final Fantasy XIV too, but that's no real surprise to anybody, right? Right? In previous years, I've done an awards video where I talk about the games I've really enjoyed playing and give them some kind of arbitrary award. Last year I started the video really late and did it kind of on the fly, so this year I've tried to be way more prepared. So I've actually got editing in this video. Let's take a look then at the categories that we've got for this year, which are not the same as last year, because consistency is not really my thing. The categories for this year's awards are, in order, Best Soulslike Game of 2022, Best Narrative Game of 2022, Most Fun Combat in a Video Game of 2022, Most Awesome Music in a Video Game of 2022, Best Aesthetic Design or Style in a Game of 2022, and I'll explain what I mean by that when we get to it. Best Graphics in a Video Game of 2022, Best Cinematics in a Video Game of 2022, Best Metroidvania Game to Play of 2022, My Game of the Year. There was originally another category in this awards list, Most Fun I Had Mapping a Metroidvania Game in 2022, and that script became so long that I'm actually putting it in a separate video. So if you are here purely for the Metroidvania map stuff that I do, and you're interested in what was my favourite game to make a map for this year, I'll put a link down below, and if I can remember to do it, I'll put one of those little card things up in the corner as well, linking you to that video as of when it is out. But for now, let's get into the actual awards. Best Souls-like Game. 2022 was busy with Souls-likes. There were some Souls-light games like Asterigos and Soldiers. There were some massive open world Soulsy epics like Elden Ring. There was a lot to choose from. Of the Souls or Souls-like games that I played this year, I could argue that, as always, the one that I enjoyed the most was actually The Surge 2, which I played through on the PlayStation 5 on a whim. I really loved the combat in that game. But it wasn't the Souls-like I spent 165 hours playing on 2 platforms, which was, of course, Elden Ring. Special mention should be made of Still Rising, which, in my opinion, is an absolute cracking game, despite its somewhat easy difficulty, but there's just no beating Elden Ring in terms of its scale, its choice, and the general exploratory nature of it. In a year that Elden Ring came out, it's obvious that no other game was ever going to take the title of Best Souls-like. Best Narrative Game. A lot of good games, with good stories out there this year. From the campy western horror of Evil West, the post-apocalyptic science fiction of Horizon Forbidden West, the mysterious and bitty lore threaded throughout Elden Ring, to the incredibly charming and sweet dialogue and story of Ghost Song. But if I base a good narrative on the pillars of a story that can get me invested, that has characters that I care about, and, let's be honest, a story that can make me cry, there was only one winner even close this year, and that was God of War Ragnarok. I know it wasn't a story for everyone, but the pace of that game just kept on going, even if it was a little too easy to destroy it by constantly dawdling off to do side effects. As the end of a duology, God of War Ragnarok was the best narrative of any video game that I played this year. It had the best beats, it had the best, most consistent characters, it was an excellent experience overall. And of course, I have a certain amount of bias because of the mythology. I'm not actually a big God of War fanboy. I like the original games. I played through all of the original games when they first came out, but I'm not like Kratos is the best character ever. But what has been done with him and his story throughout these 2 games in the Norse saga is remarkable. And that final cutscene with him where he looks at the back of the shrine at something that he never thought possible. That's stuck with me for the multiple weeks that it has now been since I completed that game. An excellent narrative experience. Most fun combats. Again, I played the Surge 2 this year, and that has my favourite stamina-based combat in a video game, I think. Bloodborne, Elden Ring, Sekiro, all of that stuff is great, but I think I prefer the Surge 2. But it's an older game, and it didn't come out in 2022, and this is my list for 2022 games. That's how it works. Both Steel Rising and Thymesia were 2 of the kind of hyped up Souls-like fun combat games this year, and they did have some fun moments in their combat, with the more traditional Soulsy combat for Steel Rising and the more Sekiro-inspired combat for Thymesia. But whilst I enjoyed both of them to an extent, Steel Rising certainly more than Thymesia, they weren't the best combat. Steel Rising was far too easy, Thymesia was just a little bit too frustrating. Obviously Elden Ring has a bazillion weapons in it, multiple ways to play through, and I'm 100% certain I will never fully explore them all. But again, just because it's got a lot of choice doesn't make it the most fun combat. For me, it never matches the heights of Bloodborne's interesting combat or the Surge 2's combats. To think of a game that's not a Souls-like, as I've already mentioned, Diablo Immortal, for all its incredible fault in terms of monetization, it does have really fun combat, in my opinion. The skill shot system, I think, works really well. Horizon Forbidden West has good hunting mechanics. It's got a much improved melee combat system over the previous entry in the series, and there's a certain sense of tactics and tactical know-how needed on even the normal difficulty to not get splatted by some of the harder enemies in the game. But the award, realistically, comes down to a choice of 3, one of which will probably surprise you. Here are the three choices. Evil West. Evil West combat is, frankly, awesome. It has got so much choice to it. You would be surprised. It is fluid. It's got great guns. It's got great crunch. It's got great movement to it. And it's just wacky and silly enough to be almost retro in its feeling of over-the-top joy to play. I've been recommending Evil West to my friends ever since I got it, just because I've had so much fun with it. It's not going to win any massive awards for most amazing game ever. It's got some jank to it in terms of its visuals, but in terms of its combat, it is great. God of War Ragnarok has some of the weightiest, crunchiest combat that I've had the pleasure of playing with, even if I didn't take advantage of all of or even many of the options. Is it as free-flowing and fluid and full of options as Elden Ring? No, not really. But for a non-stamina based game, I personally feel that Ragnarok has more fun combat. And it can be just as challenging, if not more so, than Elden Ring is. I've watched several people playing on the Give Me God of War difficulty, where you basically get one or two shot by everything. It's got challenge to it, you know. Dodging, blocking, parrying, comboing, using your runic attacks at the right time, using your relics at the right time, wearing the right kind of armor to complement your build. There's a lot of technical things in God of War Ragnarok to take note of when it comes to combat. I really ummed and ahed about who to give this award to, but I've ended up with God of War Ragnarok just because of it had the right kind of balance of challenge. There were plenty of opportunities for me to say, I need to come back. I'm just not good enough. As much as I enjoy the combat, I know when I'm not going to get anywhere. I'll come back when I'm a little bit stronger, and I'll take these enemies to town. And there were still some fights right towards the end of the game, in the post game, the Gnar fight, for example, the Berserker fights. I really enjoyed those. It might not sound like I enjoyed them from the playthrough I did of these things, but I did really enjoy them. Same as with my Elden Ring playthrough, just because I moan and bitch about the combat and its fairness at times. That's just me ranting because I'm frustrated. It's not me legitimately saying, oh, this is bad combat a lot of the time. And with the benefits of hindsight, having beaten things, you can start to see the flaws in your own play as well as the benefits of the challenges put before you. So God of War Ragnarok just edges the award in my opinion, but realistically all of those games have got highs and lows in terms of how fun their combat is. There's some things that Elden Ring does better, some things that Ragnarok does better, some things that Evil West does better, frankly. Most awesome music. Some superlative entries in this category. Grime's New Colours of Rot DLC has some more awesome music from Alex Rowe. Not a huge number of tracks, but new music nonetheless. Overwatch 2 gets its first and only mention in the awards. Overwatch 2 does a lot of things really badly, in my opinion, especially in comparison to Overwatch 1, but the music, I think, is a step up in a lot of regards. Not necessarily the sound design, but all of the music in the game seems to just be a little bit catchier and a little bit more interesting in comparison to the first game. Maybe it's because I'm not as invested in Overwatch 2 as I was with the first one. I enjoyed the first one's gameplay more. But the music in Overwatch 2 is better. Horizon Forbidden West and Cult of the Lamb both have really amazing soundtracks. The latter, actually, Cult of the Lamb soundtrack, being an excellent one to just pop out to while doing other things like I did when actually writing this script. Metal Hellsinger, I've already mentioned. It's a rhythm game. It's got an excellent metal soundtrack, even though I haven't actually finished playing the game yet. What I have played has been excellent. Elden Ring, woefully disappointing with its music in comparison to past games. There were some standouts, you know, like the Spirit track, like the main theme, but for the most part, Elden Ring's music was quite forgettable, especially when compared to the past pedigree of FromSoft games. So the decision that I had to make about music really came down to only two games. There's the awesome, gothic, majestic, techno grime of Just for Kids Warhammer 40k Darktide soundtrack, which has got some amazing tunes to fight the hordes of chaos against, or Bear McCreary's swelling masterpiece that accompanies so many powerful narrative beats in God of War Ragnarok. Both amazing soundtracks. In fact, all of the games in the category deserve recognition for having amazing soundtracks. But again, because I'm a huge believer in the fact that music should be there to accentuate both gameplay and story, and Darktide's got bugger all, frankly, in terms of story, even less than Vermintide has. Ragnarok snatches the prize for this category as well. Best aesthetic or style in a video game in 2022. I said that I was going to explain what I meant by this when I was introducing the categories. Here we go. With aesthetic or style, I'm talking about the overall stylistic identity and look of a game. We're not just talking how hyper-realistic they are, how photorealistic, or how high resolution their textures can be. We're talking things that stand out for different reasons than it just looks real. For example, games like Cult of the Lamb have this incredibly charming, cutesy art style that, let's be honest, juxtaposes quite heavily with its really dark and sometimes sinister tone. Ghost Song has this wispy, hand-drawn feel to it, which accompanies the Metroidvania exploration of these science fiction biomes and locales. Soldiers has absolutely magnificent pixel art throughout. Signalis has its retro horror stylings that harken back to the PlayStation 2 era. We've got Moonscars, which has an oil painterly or a sculpted from clay aesthetic that I really liked, but apparently a lot of people hated. Part of me wants to give the award to Warhammer 40k Darktide for the realisation of the grimdark aesthetic and presentation of the 41st millennium that's so integral to the Warhammer 40k universe. But realistically, it comes down to just 3 games. The first runner-up is Grime, Colours of Rot, which continues the weird body horror flavourings of the base game with some really stunning artistic choices in the DLC areas. There were a couple of times when I just found myself stopping and staring at the backgrounds in that game. Grime was always good for that, but the new area of Childbed and the spruced up garden, they're just really nicely done. The second runner-up is Soldiers. The pixel art is, for me, the best thing about the game. The art and the animation are so consistent, they are practically flawless in terms of a cohesive look and presentation. There was never a moment when I thought, these things don't quite gel together, save for the loading icon, which I seem to recall was a little bit odd. But the actual pixel art for 99.999% of the game was just so well done. It's a shame the actual rest of the game didn't live up to it. The winner has to be Elden Ring. For me, Elden Ring is never going to win awards for graphics, for graphical fidelity. You know, if you compare Horizon Forbidden West with Elden Ring. Elden Ring is not as realistic looking a game, but it's still a good looking game. It's not the most high resolution textures, it doesn't have the best lighting or shadowing, but what it does have is that From Software style, that invasive style that a lot of the Souls games have. The slightly elongated limbs, the slightly emaciated look to everything, the slightly desaturated colour palette. It's an aesthetic that works in tandem with and amplifies the tone of the game in a way that, as far as I'm aware, no other company is really doing outside of the indie scene. Best graphics. The counterpoint, or arguably a compliment to the Style and Aesthetic Award, is that of best graphics. Here we are talking Fidelity. We're talking about the most impressive looking games in terms of raw graphical features. This is where HD textures, ray tracing, ambient occlusion, volumetric fog, all of those options that you get to set in the graphics menu of video games while trying to tweak out a few more extra FPS into your play. This is where these categories come in, and there's not actually many contenders for this because I generally play either older games or a lot of 2D games. For 2D games, we're not talking, photorealistic graphics here. As previously mentioned, Warhammer 40k Darktide has some amazing gothic stylings, and on max settings with all the ray tracing and stuff enabled, and if you take away the terrible performance and optimization, Darktide is an absolutely stunning game. Some of the outside areas especially are massive and beautiful in a way no other game that I can think of that I've played in a long time really grasps the kind of dark majesty of these areas of the Imperium, of Hive Tertium that you're fighting through. There are just some vistas. I'll see if I can throw some up on the screen, if I can find some screenshots. They're just really, really outstanding. God of War Ragnarok is a beautiful game. It has got some of the most amazing scenery and zone design in any video game I've played. The texture work is excellent across the board. The zone designs are interesting and varied and exciting, and there is so much variety on display there. And because of this, I have to be honest, I've ummed and ahed about this category more than any other. My natural inclination is to give this award to Horizon Forbidden West because of how beautiful the game is. It doesn't have quite the exciting variety of the different realms of God of War Ragnarok. It is more focused for the most part, at least in the bits that I've played of it. But I think the secret to success in this category is lighting. I think God of War might otherwise have edged this out, actually, but if you play through God of War on the PlayStation 5, you'll notice it places that sometimes things look quite flat, especially the main character. Sometimes the lighting and the shadows just isn't there, and you kind of feel like it should be. Whereas with Horizon Forbidden West, it is beautiful 4K HD at all times. It is the game that more consistently made me go, ooh, and just stop and look around me. Ragnarok did that a lot as well, don't get me wrong, but I think Forbidden West does it more realistically and beautifully. Very close one, this one. For pure visual fidelity, Darktide, Ragnarok, and Forbidden West, all winners. Best cinematics / cutscenes in a video game. I'm going to start off with one that might surprise you. Evil West. Evil West has some absolutely amazing pre-rendered cutscenes. By some, I mean actually there's a lot. There's a lot of pre-rendered cutscenes in that game. must have spent a huge chunk of budget on them because there are a massive number of them, and they're really high quality and they're really good. They're really well done. Still Rising as well has some really good cutscenes, but they are accompanied sometimes by a level of AA quality jank that muddies them or ruins them with iffy frame rates or bugged camera angles that lessens their impact. But I wanted to give a shout out to Still Rising for the quality of what they've done. So again, naturally, the best cinematics come down to the two biggest budget titles I played this year, and Ragnarok just crushes this one. Maybe if I'd got more than halfway through Forbidden West, and I keep saying I'm going to go back to it, and I am, maybe if I'd finished Forbidden West, this wouldn't be the case. But in terms of the bits that I have played, Ragnarok just wins, hands down. It might not have the best lighting at times, as I've said, but in terms of everything else, the music, the motion capture, the facial capture, and facial animation, etc., the story that backs it all up, Ragnarok delivers the story in the most consistent, most emotional way, all the way through. I don't think there was a single cinematic or cutscene that didn't feel earned and that fell flat. It is a masterpiece of cinematic storytelling in a video game. Regardless of what you thought of the story or the gameplay, in terms of the cinema, it was amazing. Best Metroidvania Game for 2022. I played a lot, a massive number of Metroidvania games this year. Even discounting the ones I played from previous years, I've still played quite a number of them. Just going to go through a few notable standouts. Islets, super charming Metroidvania where you're trying to put the world back together. Soldiers, a massive, and I do mean massive, Metroidvania with gorgeous pixel art. Ghost Song, a 2D science fiction Metroidvania which sees you take control of a mysterious dead suit as you help some people fix their wrecked spaceship. Haiku the Robot, a very charming pixel art Metroidvania that borrows more than a few things from Hollow Knight but does so incredibly well. Moonscars, a 2D, slightly Soulsy Metroidvania with an interesting and deep philosophical storyline about what makes a person who they are. Eterna Noctis, an absolutely massive, challenging, overly challenging, frustrating Metroidvania that some people, not me, but some people claim is a true successor and better in every way than Hollow Knight. I disagree. And The Night Witch, a bullet hell shmup style Metroidvania. And I've got to be honest, every single one of these Metroidvanias that I've played this year has flaws, sometimes quite significant flaws. You know, Eterna Noctis was beautiful and huge, so many things to explore, so many massive zones, but really frustrating to play, really nitpicky in terms of some of the mechanics and precision necessary to complete those mechanics and the challenges that are presented with you. Ghost Song, its story, and it was such a story-focused game. It was tied too heavily to, in my opinion, easily missable conversations, and it had a scaling difficulty that meant you could get into a loop of trouble just a little bit too easily. Both of those things I worked my way around on a second playthrough, but I felt like I shouldn't have fallen into those traps in the first place with a little bit clearer game design. Haiku the Robot was an amazing effort from, I can't remember whether it was a solo dev or a small team, but as much as I enjoyed it, it hasn't really stuck with me as a standout in any particular category. Music, exploration, gameplay, etc. Soldiers was almost as bloated, maybe more bloated than Eterna Noctis, and whilst the pixel art and the music was super well done, the game balance and the mechanics of combat, the choices of systems really left a lot to be desired, even though the exploration of the game was doing amazing things. It didn't help that the developers then took basically a hatchet to the game's systems and difficulty when it came to patching, fixing things that weren't broken and not really doing anything about the things that were broken, to the extent that the people that were pissed off originally were still pissed off, and the people that weren't pissed off because they liked the challenge were also now pissed off. It was a bit of a shit show overall, unfortunately, soldiers. Grime's Colours of Rot DLC added to an already excellent, if janky at times, game, but since the base game came out before 2022, I'm not including it on the list, which leaves, for me, Moonscars really as, and this is going to sound weird, the Metroidvania game with the fewest flaws for 2022. Not exactly an endearing way of looking at it, really, but it was the Metroidvania that I can allow myself to put in this category that I consistently had the most fun simply playing and exploring and experiencing this year. But if you will let me break my own rules, so to speak, then Grime Colours of Rot is clearly the superior Metroidvania. Yes, it's more janky than Moonscars in a lot of cases, and because it is such a small indie development team, they are struggling to fix a lot of the bugs that keep rearing their heads because it's their first game, basically, and they're learning a lot of stuff as they go about UI design and so on and so forth. Grime is just an excellent game. It's got Souls-like stamina-based combat, it's got weird body horror visuals, it's got some great music throughout, it's got some massive zones to explore, it's got loads and loads of secrets to find, it's got some really unique traversal mechanics, it is cheap, the developers are very, very responsive, they are really easy to communicate with in the Discord. It is an excellent experience. So Moonscars is the best Metroidvania for 2022 that was only released in 2022, but I think the best Metroidvania that I played in 2022 because of the DLC is very much Grime Colours of Rot. Demajen's Game of the Year. This is a no-brainer because I've been saying it since I finished it. This was not a difficult decision or choice to make. I love Elden Ring for so many things, but for me it just doesn't come anywhere close to being the complete experience that God of War Ragnarok was. Elden Ring, let me get this straight. I love Elden Ring. It is a fantastic game. It does open world in a way no other game does. It has got a lot of bosses, a lot of secrets, a lot of challenge, a lot of options, a lot of replayability, but God of War Ragnarok tells a better, tighter story and is, for me, just more fun overall. For me, Ragnarok is the game that I most enjoyed this year, even though it was for 100 fewer hours than Elden Ring. Everything came together in that entertainment package, and while it doesn't stand out in terms of the choices of combat, the replayability of combat like Elden Ring does, it just worked in a tighter way. It worked better in so many other areas than Elden Ring. Elden Ring did exploration really well. That sense of finding things. It did it better than God of War Ragnarok did. And I still think God of War Ragnarok does the quote-unquote open world better than games like Horizon Forbidden West does, or Assassin's Creed does. Elden Ring just does it the best out of all of those, but it just doesn't have that feeling of I care about my character, I care about what I'm doing. You know, you really have to hunt down the story in Elden Ring, just like you did with Bloodborne, just like you did with Dark Souls 3. It's not necessarily a critique in terms of, oh, you know, it's bad. I like the way From Software tells their stories. I do. But God of War Ragnarok told a better story. So there we go. Those are my awards for 2022. As I said, there is another video coming up on the most fun maps that I made in 2022. So as I said, if you are here on the channel because of my Metroidvania maps, look out for that one. And let's just drum up a bit of engagement here. Let me know what wins in your version of any or all of the categories down in the comments below. Let me know what you would have put. You know, don't tell me why my choices are wrong, because you're not going to win with that. They're my choices because it's my subjective awards. But by all means, tell me what you would have chosen and why. Have a happy rest of your year. Hope you have a great new year. Enjoy the start to 2023. And hopefully I will see you again soon. Cheerio. Thank you very much for watching. If you enjoyed the video, why not click the like button and consider subscribing. Remember, you can ring the bell notification icon to get notified when new videos go live. And until next time, cheerio.